Good day. I'm Mike Peters, the singer of a rock band called The Alarm from Wales in the UK. I have been the said singer since 1981, but also a life in music before that, through punk, mod, everything else that was going on in the UK at the time, and been at the creative centre of The Alarm's music for 14 odd years. I'm still here. We've got a new album out called Forwards. I'm a cancer survivor, run a global charity called Love, Hope and Strength, and we just hiked the Alps. And I was speaking at a World Cancer Leaders Summit in Los Angeles in the coming week. So here I am, Mike Peters from The Alarm, Love, Hope, Strength, ready to talk.
Good, excellent, Mike. Well, what we do here, in fact, you probably can't see it, and you won't be able to see this because it's not on video yet, but I do have the Strength backstage tour past there from back in the day. So we go back 42 years, Mr. Peters. My God.
That's amazing.
Without sounding like two old blokes talking, just go back to I mean, I know the early names of your bands. You know, actually, if I'd have known you then, I would have given you a better name than the Toilets. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the Toilets was came as a flash of inspiration in a pub called the Victoria Hotel in Prestatyn, and I was having a pint with the bass player, and I need to go to the bathroom, and saw the sign, thought, that's it, we're going to be called the Toilets. And this was 1977. I'd just seen the Sex Pistols in 76 at the Quaint Ways in Chester before the furor broke out, and saw an incredible band that changed my life. And here I am, starting a punk band, trying to persuade people who've never heard of punk and don't know what it is to be in a band. And then we got a few gigs straight away. We were actually probably pretty good, much better than we realised. We had a great singer from Coleraine in Northern Ireland, a singer called O'Malley, who was a proper character. And I met him in a bar in Rhyl. I was supposed to have another lead singer. He never got off the bus. It's a proper transition moment. And then there was no phones to get hold of people to say, where are you? So I carried on with the night out, and Pretty Vacant was playing on the DJ on the dance floor. And I saw this guy pogoing higher than anyone else in the middle of the floor. And I went up to him and asked him if he wanted to be the singer of the band. And he said, yeah. And he was an amazing character. And I went to Liverpool to Eric's club, which is in Matthew Street, opposite where the Cavern was, where the Beatles started out. And I'd heard that you could have a Saturday afternoon audition gig there. And so I went up one Saturday, and just it was before opening time, and I knocked on the window, and the guy put up the shutter, and it turned out it was a guy called Roger Eagle, who was a very famous Northern Soul DJ, entrepreneur, run the Twisted Wheel in Manchester, and here he was in a punk club in Liverpool. And I said, oh, I've come to try and get a Saturday afternoon audition for my band. We're from Wales. He says, oh, I haven't seen any punk bands from Wales yet. He goes, what are you called? And I went, we're called the Toilets. And he went, that's a terrible name. You can't play here with a name like that. I said, he said, what's your name? And I said, well, you must have a stage name. And I said, it's Eddie Bop. And he goes, well, if you call yourselves that, you can play next Saturday. So we did. And we turned up a week later. And as I said that, he said, I said, oh, thanks very much. We'll come back next Saturday. And he started putting a poster up in the window, and it said, secret gig, The Clash, next Saturday. So I actually bought a ticket off him there and then. So I got ticket number one, which I still have to see the gig, because we played the following Saturday, and we went on stage, and we just ripped the venue to bits. And the singer was incredible. He could hold the audience in the palm of his hand. And as we put the last chord down, Bob Geldof jumped on the stage and shook my hand and said that was amazing, because the Boomtown Rats had played the night before. And then Roger Eagle bounded on the stage and said, do you want to play with the Clash tonight? And I was like, what? And I couldn't believe it.
Oh my God! Really?
So that's why I've still got ticket number one, because I didn't have to give him a ticket in, because we played with the Clash that night. And again, it was incredible. And there was another Northern Soul DJ at Eric's at the time, a guy called Chris Harrop, and he was from Baghilt near Flint in North Wales. And he came on the stage. He goes, I want to be your manager and take you to London. And he hooked us up with another famous Northern Soul guy called A.D. Croasdale. who runs all the Kent Records Northern Soul reissues, and probably one of the foremost soul record collectors in Britain. And he let us stay in his flat around the corner from BBC, and they helped us get a gig in the Roxy in Covent Garden in London. And they took us out for a first pint in a pub in London. And before I knew it, I looked around and thought, where's O'Malley the singer gone? Next minute, there was these things called blues going around. I think he did a whole bag full of them and was climbing up the walls. And it became a bit scary at that moment, and sort of frightened me a little bit, to be honest, that the dark side of rock and roll could come into your life that quickly. We hadn't even started. And that was sort of really the beginning of the Alarm, to be honest, because we got Nigel Twist, or Nigel Buckle as he was called at the time, to become the drummer. Although he didn't really like punk rock like we did, he was still a hippie with loons. I used to have to make him wear tight trousers to go on stage and all sorts of things. But yeah, heady times but it was formative. And we didn't have what other bands had. When I looked around at the Sex Pistols, had Malcolm McLaren, and the Clash had Bernie Rhodes, or the Buzzcocks, who I loved, had Richard Boone. They had someone older in their camp who could help them direct the energy and channel it. And we didn't have that. We were just straight out of Rill, and we had no idea. We didn't even know whether our songs were any good. We were just playing off instinct. Things I'd learned to be I hadn't even learned to be a songwriter. I just wrote these 2-minute blasts of music based on what I was hearing and writing about what I could see in front of me. And then I realized when we got in front of an audience, we're actually a really good band with it. And O'Malley died in 2003, and he sort of fell foul to drugs in his life, and that took his energy away and his talent, because he was incredible. I often think back and think, what if he'd been straighter and more channeled it, and could have focused his energy better, maybe with someone older around him who could, steer him in the right direction. I often want what we could have become as a band from that point onwards, without me having to become the singer and learn how to do all the other things that you have to do to create a band. But it was like, we were lucky. We started off great. We played with the Buzzcocks, we played with the Fall, we played loads of gigs in the Northwest in the punk scene. But we fell away because we never got to make a demo or a record until
was
much
late
later.
70s, Mike?
Yeah, 77 into 78, yeah. And the bass player, he had a girlfriend called Sarah Sugarman, and she went on to become a big film director in Hollywood and doing things with Lindsay Lohan and Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, and still making big movies now. And in 2004, the Alarm did a sort of punk rock swoop on the music industry, and we created a fake band called the Poppy Fields, because we were all now in our 40s. And we pressed the record up and presented it to people as the Poppy Fields. And the industry fell for it, and they started A-listing the song and inviting this young 19-year-old band to be on MTV 120 minutes. And I was portraying myself as the manager and saying, oh, they're doing their exams. They can't possibly come on TV just yet. And then the record became a big hit, and it was the biggest thing that had happened to us since 68 Guns in the 80s. And when the news of the Subterfuge broke, and that this young band were really the Alarm, who were in their 40s in disguise, it became a gigantic news story, and got picked up by John H. Williams, who was the producer of the Shrek movies. And he invited me to his production office in Hollywood, and I went, and he said, we want to make a film based on the 45 RPM Poppy Fields story. And he said to me, I've got this amazing director in mind. You won't know, but she's having hit movies at the moment. Her name's Sarah Sugarman. I went, well, you'll never believe this, but I went to school with her, and she went out with the bass player of our punk band, The Toilets. And when I met her with Sarah, she couldn't believe it either, that serendipity had brought us to this moment. And she said, okay, I'm going to make the film. It's going to be called Vinyl. We're going to have Phil Daniels, the actor, in it, and Keith Allen's going to be in it, and all these great, Perry Benson, great British cast who've been in some brilliant films that were British based. And then she said, I want the soundtrack to be all those songs you wrote for the Toilets back in 1977. So I had one surviving tape of the Toilets, and I took that to the studio and copied the tempos and the speed of the song, so it was pretty authentic, and even recorded them with the same guitar I had from 1977. And we got Phil Daniels involved in the music as the sort he did quite a lot of the O'Malley parts, and it's a really, the soundtrack vinyl is a really great representation of what the Toilets sounded like in 1977.
That's amazing. I didn't know anything about that. I mean, you did, to quote a rock and roll term, you worked your asses off and everything. You were kind of right place at the right time. But then again, you wouldn't automatically think Wales was the right place. But you always went back and you never left. You didn't, I mean, even the Beatles couldn't wait to move to London and stuff, could they? You always kept your roots.
Well, in Wales, we have a thing called Hiraeth. And it's Hiraeth is an untranslatable word, because it's a feeling rather than something specific. And the closest we can get to describing it is, it's like every Welsh person who has the Hiraeth is tied to Wales like an umbilical cord. It means you can never really leave Wales, because the Hiraeth is always calling, and it's always elastic band that's pulling you back home. And we're not like the Irish. I think that they invade everywhere and take over, and they set up bars and enclaves and live there. With the Wales, we go to these places, but we always come home. We don't leave our mark behind. And they always say the difference between Wales and Ireland, or the Welsh and the Irish, when the Romans invaded Britain, the Irish are the Welsh people that could swim to get away from the Romans, and the Welsh are the ones that couldn't swim, and so we just stayed behind and dug in and held on to our turf.
Excellent. But so really, it wasn't just the time and punk and everything that was your inspiration. It was actually your surroundings as well. I mean, obviously you were energized from being where you wanted to be, not where people probably insisted. You've only really had management in the early days, haven't you? You look after yourself now.
Yeah, we've always looked after ourselves. But, I think that, again, it's a strength and a weakness. When we started the Toilets, we didn't have a Svengali around us to direct our own. So I had to go knock on doors and find our gigs and that kind of thing. And even when we moved to London, it was in 1981, we'd had had the bands, the Toilets, that morphed into 17 as more of a mod power pop band, which is maybe to what we were really leaning towards melodically. And it was when we started the Alarm, I just thought we managed to. This is how the Alarm started in a way. We were in a band called 17, and we'd seen a band from America called the Stray Cats buy airline tickets and just come to London to try and make it, and they did, and they were the hottest thing in the world at the time. And then we did what the Alarm did in 2004. We did it in 1980. We pretended to be a support band to get a gig with the Stray Cats, and I phoned up the band that was supporting them, asked if we could use their drum kit. I phoned the venue and said the Stray Cats had been to see us and wanted to be one of the opening acts, if we could use the support band's drum kit. And they said, yeah, okay, if the Stray Cats want it, that's what's going to happen. And we got as far as to jumping up on the equipment with our guitars before the Stray Cats manager realised that there was another band that he didn't know anything about to play with his group in Crystal Palace. And as he was about to kick us off the stage, Slim Jim Phantom, the drummer, comes out and goes, let them play, they've got this far, what can 20 minutes, what harm can an extra 20 minutes do? And so they let us play. We got talking to them, and we realized we had something in common. None of us were from London. We were from Wales, they were from America. They'd taken a big risk coming to London, and it had worked for them. And they invited us back they were recording at a place called Jam Studios with Dave Edmonds, who happened to be from Wales, the great guitarist Dave Edmonds. And when we got to the studio, we all got on fantastically well. And we sat in the room while they recorded Runaway Boys, Rock This Town, all with Dave Edmonds. We watched it all going down. And then they invited us on tour with them. And that was our breeding ground for the Alarm. We learned everything where we were going wrong, and we channeled it ourselves, you know, into, we didn't have anyone mold us. We just channeled it into ourselves. And Gaz, our old roadie, who became a TV presenter, he always said, I sat everyone down one day after the Stray Cats tour and said, right, we're going to remake ourselves. We're going to remodel ourselves, to quote Roxy Music, as the Alarm. We're going to be a new entity now. And I had a list, and my list was like something like, we're going to make a single, move to London, get some gigs, find a manager, find an agent, go on tour, get a record deal, make an album, get on top of the pops, and then we're going to go to America. And Gaz always said we did everything. The only one thing he got wrong was we went to America before we went on tour in the UK.
Is that right?
We got on top of the pop. Yeah.
How did that happen?
And that's what we got lucky in 1981. We moved to London with our own single. We had our own flat. There was a guy called Louis Parker who'd come from Rill. He was a bit of a very interesting character in the 70s, and he used to book bands into North Wales, and he used to book them onto the Colwyn Bay Pier, and he'd have things like Jackie Wilson, the Tramps, lot of soul bands that were sort of associated with Northern Soul. And he also opened a nightclub in a hotel in St. Asaph called the Tullardy, and the nightclub was called the Stables, and it was one of the first clubs in Britain to be modelled on American sort of guidelines. So he wouldn't let anyone in who was everyone had to be over 21 to get in this club, which is unusual in 1970 Britain, where you could be 18 to get in everywhere. And what he used to, because he owned a hotel, and he'd had all these bands play on Colwyn Bay Pier, and then they would stay at the hotel, but they'd have to do a second performance at midnight in his trendy nightclub called the Stables. So obviously, I would go there, and I saw Jackie Wilson singing there. I saw the Tramps playing. I saw the Shy Lights, all these kind of American soul bands up close and personal. It was pretty amazing. And then Louis moved into the wider music sphere. He booked us one gig playing with the Slits in 1977 in St. Asaph, which we did. And then he moved to London himself and set up an agency called the Concord Music Agency. And he'd been booking bands like Shack Attack, all these sort of disco bands. And when we got to London in 1981, I called him and asked him if he could try and help us get a gig. And he said, the only band I'm representing that might have anything to do with the Alarm is The Fall with Mark E. Smith. And he said, I can get you the gig with them possibly at the venue in Victoria in London. But he said, they choose the support band. So I'm going to give you the manager, Kay Carroll. I'm going to give you her phone number, and you're going to have to phone her yourself and say Louis asked if you could play with The Fall. So I called her from a payphone and said, could we have this gig with The Fall? And she said to me, well, do you sound anything like The Fall? So I thought to myself, well, shall I lie and say, yeah, we sound just like The Fall? Or should I be honest and say, no, we don't sound anything like The Fall?
Nobody sounds like The Fall.
I know, exactly. So I thought I might as well be honest. I said, no, we don't sound anything like The Fall. And she said, thank God for that. We hate bands that sound like The Fall. You can have a gig.
Yeah, so perfect.
We got the gig at the venue, and then we'd been hassling an agency in London called Wasted Talent to try and get us some gigs. And the secretary there was a girl called Sarah Jane Olsen. And we told her we'd got this gig with The Fall at the agency. So she came to the gig hoping to say to us, I believe, look, I've been to see you now. You're no good. Stop hassling me.
Yeah.
But the opposite happened. We played the gig. She thought we were fantastic, and called us the next day and said, Ian Wilson, who represents you too, I'm his secretary. So he wants to come and see you, and will you play a gig at the Rock Garden that they'd organised for us overnight? And we went to play at the Rock Garden, which we could never get a gig at. So I don't know how they got us one in 24 hours, but they did. And we thought, this is it. And all of a sudden, you know what London was like at the time? If you got a smidge of a buzz going, everyone followed en masse. It was just like, we're going to see this band tonight. The phones would ring, or they'd meet in the pub afterward, and everyone would go to see the same gig. And all of a sudden, the Rock Garden was packed full of the entire London music industry, A&R community overnight. And we went on stage, and we were kind of aware that there was a buzz happening right in the venue. And we gave everything we got. We played our hearts out. And then we thought, this is it. We went in the dressing room. We thought, any minute, the music industry is going to come filing in through the door. And nothing happened. Not one. We were there for 20 minutes, 25 minutes. No one came in the dressing room until Sarah Jane opened the door about half an hour later, looked a bit, sort of bedraggled, and said, "Oh, that was great. Ian Wilson wants to meet you for breakfast tomorrow and talk about some more gigs." And be like, "Hooray, we made it!" And anyway, it turns out that years later, Sarah Jane admitted to me that the whole industry was trying to bang the door down, but she was barricading the door. So no, they're represented by Ian Wilson. There's no point coming in here.
Fantastic. And great. Love it.
Yeah, and we met with Ian the next day, and because we'd had sort of bad experience, we'd supported loads of bands at 17, and we had once we got offered a gig at the last minute to go and open for Dexy's Midnight Runners at Huddersfield Town Hall. And the agent had said to us, look, if they like you, if Kevin Rowland likes you, you could get the whole tour, because the band that was supposed to be doing it have had to pull out for some reason. So we hightailed it up to Huddersfield Town Hall, jumped on stage, blasted out our set at 17. And then we thought, and then I saw Kevin Rowland after we came off stage. And I said, Kevin, what do you think? He goes, oh, I didn't see you. I've only just walked in the door. I said, but I tell you what, if you can play tomorrow night in Cardiff, I'll make sure I come in and see you. And if you're any good, you can come on tour with Dexy's Midnight Runners. So great, okay. So we went down to Cardiff. We gave it everything we got. Come off stage. There's Kevin Rowland. I said, what do you think, Kevin? He goes, nah, you're rubbish, you're shite. You're not going to have the rest of the tour.
Really?
But I respected the honesty, the direct. He didn't leave me, oh, I'll give you a ring, or I'll have my people speak to you, and then leave you dangling for months on end thinking, oh, when's the phone going to ring? He was just straight up, and I admired that. And but as a result, when we met, right? Yeah, that's it. But as a result, when we met Ian Wilson this day after we played the Rock Garden, we one of our manifestos as a band was to Ian. We said, look, Ian, we really we respect who you work for. We can see the roster you've got for Waste Talent. But one thing about the Alarm is we never, ever, ever want to support a band again for the rest of our lives, because you can book headline shows, and we want to make it on our own terms. That's all we're ever going to do. He said, oh, I respect that. Well done, lads. It's good to... And we shook hands and said, right, let's carry on. And then we got home that afternoon after the breakfast meeting. The phone went. We were about to come home to Wales for Christmas. And it was Ian. He said, Mike, I know we talked today and you never want to support them. There's a great opportunity come up tomorrow night to play with U2 at the Lyceum Ballroom on the Strand. Do you want to do it? And I was like, well, hang on a minute. I'll talk to the others, and put my hand over the phone. Said, it's Ian, to the band. I said, you want us to play with you too, but we've got this manifesto. We're never going to support a band. What we're going to do? And Eddie was going, yeah, I think we've got to stick to our guns, and Dave's shaking his head. Oh, yeah, I think it's a bit early to give up on our rules now. And Nigel Twist, the drummer, leaps over, grabs the phone, and goes, Ian, of course we're going to play with you two tomorrow night.
But you two, this was around Boy, wasn't it? I mean, they hadn't broken.
It was October, the last night of the October tour in 1981.
Oh, I must have got it wrong. I seem to have thought you were out around the same time as Boy with you two, because there was yourselves, the Concert Angels, maybe Simple Minds. There was a lot of acts around the same time.
We went to see, I first saw you two in the Marquee Club when they did a sort of Tuesday night residency, whatever the night was, early in the week. And I think I went to the first or second gig because it was about half full at the time. But by the time they'd done the fourth one, it was selling out everywhere. And but I remember seeing them, thinking how amazing they were. And I was in London when A Day Without Me came out, and I was a little bit disappointed in the record, to be honest, when I first heard it, because it wasn't as raw as it was when I'd seen them live. And I think that was, I think for most fans who go and see potentially or future great bands and see them before they're recorded, there's always that lag of it doesn't quite live up to the expectation, because the recording studio sort of, for young bands, they're not used to being in that environment, and of course there's a sort of rawness to the recording, but it's not quite the same as when you've seen them live. And but now I can appreciate the songs on Boy is a great album, but at the time I was a bit, the production's, what's all these sort of noises in the background? I just want to hear the guitar loud and this sort of thing. And again, that's just the naivety of not understanding the process. So I was quite aware of U2 when we went to play with them, but it was the second night of the October tour. I'd been in Liverpool the night they played at the Royal Court Theatre on the October tour, but I hadn't gone to the gig. But I remember walking past the dressing room. I think I'd gone to it might have been Brady's by then, see another gig by someone else and I can remember seeing Pete Wiley outside talking to Bono by the stage door, and I kind of like waved at Pete Wiley as I went past, and I think Pete went in and sang some song with him on the end of the night or something like that. I seem to remember they might have done they used to do Send in the Clouds or something like that. I can't remember, but here we turned up. It was December 1981. It was the second night of the two they played at the Lyceum. U2 went sound checking because they'd played the night before. They'd gone to do some Christmas shopping. So we were setting up our equipment on the stage, and then I was putting my harmonicas out on my Roland JC 120 amplifier. And then there was a tap on my shoulder. I looked round, and it was Bono himself introducing himself to me, and he was intrigued by my acoustic guitar with a pickup in it and harmonicas. He hadn't really come across the harmonicas, and was in, and I was saying, look, I can't really play guitar, and the Edge doesn't, we don't have an acoustic guitar in U2. And I said, look, do you want me to show you some chords? And so he invited me back to the Portobello Hotel that night where they were staying. And off I went and sat down and showed Bono how to play Knocking on Heaven's Door, because that was the easiest song I could think of.
Brilliant. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I interviewed, not interviewed, but chit-chatted with Ian for Moments That Rock not too long ago. And they were representing U2 before they had a contract, weren't they? Because I remember going to see him. I think it might have just signed or just shortly after, because I saw him like 4 times in a week. I saw him play to a pub in Manchester to 11 people. But the previous Saturday, they were on at Manchester Polytechnic, which I think you've probably done yourself over the years. And they were third on the bill to Wahi and Pink Military. And Mark Radcliffe was living with me at the time, and we went to see them. And I keep telling this story. It's probably on 1,000 of my own podcasts anyway. But the interesting thing was, I always say, like, going back to those times, it was very exciting things. So I always say that, on my side of things, behind the scenes, we're all hustlers, Mike, but it's how you hustle. And you seem to have, because of your, like, pleasant in your face thing, when you want to get to people listen to you. And all you ever want is an answer. And like you say, you respected, Kevin Rowland turning around and saying, I think you're crap, rather than patronizing. You say, yeah, give me another week, I'll give it another listen, play it to the boys and get back to you. And then you're sitting and waiting why nothing's happening. But going back to, I thought, for some reason, I thought you were with U2 right from the beginning. So we must have met only 41 years ago, not 42 years ago. Because that gig that me and Radcliffe went to was the 31st of May, 1981 at the Polytechnic. And that's what kind of got me back to Ireland and set up independently, because we both saw a certain something in that band. And, they weren't very good. I mean, the Edge was, Larry was good. Adam was not good at all. Bono's vocal.
I think we met for the first time in the December of 1982. We played that one show with U2 in December 81, and that was, then they were going off to make a new album to write. I think Bono went to Jamaica on holiday at Chris Blackwell's house or something, and then the Edge started Sunday Bloody Sunday, and I didn't hear from them. I went to the Portobello Hotel, we exchanged phone numbers, Bono and I, but I wasn't in the habit of picking it up and calling him at that point, but we obviously struck up a friendship that night that was indelible in some ways. And a year later, almost 11 months later, through the Ian Wilson connection, because obviously Ian was their agent. He said to me, "Oh look, you two they've finished their new album and they're going to go out and road test some songs before the new year, and they've got the single in on New Year's Eve. New Year's Day came out on January the 1st, 1983, and they want you to be the opening act." And it was like, wow, amazing, So we hightailed it up to Glasgow, and we played in the it was the big. It was called Tiffany's in Glasgow.
I remember.
And it was
yeah.
Well, that would have been the night we met. Then that was in Sauchiehall Street, and that was the first time they played New Year's Day and Sunday Bloody Sunday ever. And then the second night was Manchester Apollo, and you were definitely there, because on the bootleg of the gig, during one of the songs, Bono goes, "All right, tone down."
I know. I wish I could never find that record. It's over on the front of the balcony or something. Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Was that Salford University or somewhere
That
else?
was Apollo, Manchester Apollo.
Apollo.
Yeah, that was 82. And
Mike, can I call you straight back, because we've got 3.5 minutes left, instead of like stopping mid-sentence?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Is that okay? It takes 2 minutes to download, and I'll send you an invite straight away.
Okay, great. All right, Tone.
Bless you, sir. Hang on.